Okay, so that doesn't sound good. So what I want to start off with here is a look at where we have been and where we are. So here is our schedule that we gave. By the way, I redid the slides. I'm kind of in a constant process of upgrading them, adding things and cleaning things up and standardizing certain things. So if you look on your WhatsApp, you'll see the latest version of them, which is this version of it. I'm not changing too much of the regular stuff, but I'm cleaning some things up. So today is day 9, and today is the 6th of November, and so we're going to review basically today, and then tomorrow, day 10, the 7th of November, which will be a Monday, we'll have the final closed book test at 6:30 p.m. from say 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. thereabouts, and you'll get a chance to fill out the test. I'll send out the link, and you'll have an hour or so, because I don't want to give an unlimited amount of time for people to do that, because that leaves open all kinds of possibilities, and it just makes it impossible to think straight. So from about 6:30 till 7:30, if you could make it at that time, I'd really appreciate it. And
it's for tomorrow, right?
That's tomorrow, right, that's tomorrow. And now we're on not EDT, but we're now on EST, so Eastern Standard Time, which is, of course, right now I have 10 o'clock, 10:06, I assume most of you in New York have the same time. So that will be at 6:30 tomorrow. And then I would say a week or two, you can finish up with your Sloka studies. The men should get together with Dharmaraj. Has anybody not touched base with Dharmaraj or with Glikaria at this point? The ladies are connecting with Glikaria and the men with Dharmaraj. So
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
I couldn't make it, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Uh-huh.
I already started giving the sloka. Glikaria Mataji, she's in here. I already gave 2 of them.
To who?
Glikaria Mataji.
Okay, so you're already starting. How about you, Pushpanjali?
No, still working on it with Glikaria. I'm in community. Yes. Mm-hmm.
You've connected with Glikaria, but you haven't actually memorized the sloka yet, right? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay. And
Maharaj, I did not, but I started 2.7 sloka memorizing. But I'll meet with her. Yesterday I studied.
You can get with Dharmaraj, her husband.
Oh, okay.
Do you have his number?
Possible? Yeah. Could you please push it one more time? I know you did, but it is way back, so I'm searching it again. But if you have close by,
okay, I'll do
drop it in the offset.
I'll do
please.
it later. Right. And,
later is fine.
Okay.
Yes, Mom. I contacted Dharmaraj, and I have a meeting with him today after our meeting, and I memorized 3 so far.
Oh, great! That's very good. How about you? I guess Bhaktivatsala, you're doing these 2. You're meeting with Dharmaraj, or how is it working?
Yes, Maharaj. I I know a few of them, but I just have to memorize one more time.
Okay.
And then I'll call him.
Okay. How about Sri Radhe? How are you doing on it? With
I connected with Glikaria, and I made a time to recite the first 2 verses, and go from there. See how that goes.
Okay. Now, 2 sessions ago, not last Monday, I think it was last Sunday, a week ago, I gave everybody essay to start working on so I could see whether the essays were heading in the right direction. And there's still 3 of you have done absolutely nothing on the essay. So
yes, this is one is me, because I think Monday.
No, you did something. You did something on it, but yours wasn't right. I was just trying to get you to do that, but we didn't get anything from Yarun, and we didn't get anything from Madan Gopal. We didn't get anything from Arjuna. So
yes, I was actually using this one for one of my essays to work on.
Okay. So what I wanted to do is just to get a sense of how it's going, to see if you're heading in the right direction. I don't want you to spend a week working on something and it's completely wrong, for one reason or another, So that's why I wanted to get a sense of how it was heading for you, Some of you were probably pretty, confident and competent with writing essays, but others maybe not so much. And I've seen already that sometimes the devotees can misunderstand what the question is saying. And, if you spend a whole lot of time writing the answer to a question, but the question is actually incorrect, then, it'll create a problem. You'll have to do it all over again, So that's why I'm trying to get an idea of whether, these are heading in the right direction or not. Okay, so
Maharaj, I'm sorry. Until Tuesday, we have download program. I told you earlier. Every day we have download program going on this month.
Well,
so
Hari Bol Narahari. Bhagavan Narahari. You got to make a choice. You can't tell me that you're volunteering for this stuff. Either you take the course or you do your programs, but you can't do both and then give me excuses that you can't get to it. That's what it drives me crazy about this. People take this course and then they decide they're going to volunteer for that. They're going to be for this puja. They're going to go to this person's home. They're going to do this. They're going to travel to see their guru halfway across the planet. They're going to travel here. It doesn't work like that. I'm starting to.
I'll make it. I'll try to make it.
You may have prior commitments, but either you decide you're going to keep those prior commitments and drop the course, or you're going to give up those prior commitments and take the course. But this is the kind of thing that just really isn't working, and it's driving me crazy. That I guess most don't realize that this course requires an investment of time. It's not like you just sit and listen to me blab, although, there's unfortunately a good amount of that where you have to sit and listen to me blab. But there's also homework, there's reading, there's learning slokas, there's writing essays. All these things take time. If you're cooking Sunday programs, if you're on some kind of Damodarastakam program, if you're some kind of traveling to India, or you volunteered for making 100 flower garlands, it just won't work. You've got to do one of the two things. You've got to either drop the course and do your whatever special service you've got, or keep the course and tell them that, well, you're taking Bhakti Sastri and you can't do these things right now. You'll be happy to do service after the Bhakti Sastri course is finished, but in the future, before I start this course, I'm going to be sure, I'm going to, have a whole list of things I don't want people to take the course if they're going to do. If you're going to travel to see your guru, if you're not going to be in the same city all the time, you're going to be traveling all over the world, don't take the course. If you're going to be, doing some extracurricular activity like making 1,000 flower garlands, or like, cooking Sunday programs, or you're going to be doing some kind of special seasonal program like Damodarastakam or Kartik or some kind of vrata or what have you, then don't take the program. You won't have time for it. That's the way I'm gonna try to run it from now on, because there's a time investment here, and you've got to make the time investment. I can't deliver knowledge to you by some kind of syringe and put it in your head. everybody that wants to learn the philosophy of Krishna consciousness has to make some time in their lives to actually do it. You have to sit down and brush aside other things. When you go to school, you don't have people running in every 5 minutes and saying, we need your help in the kitchen. You don't get up from your geometry class or English, or you don't get up from a class in physics or something like that and run into the kitchen and then come back into the physics class. It doesn't work like that. When you're actually doing some kind of study, you've got to have that free time. And it is an investment of time. If you don't have that time, then you don't bother to read the texts or the chapters before we speak about them, and you're at a handicap. You don't have time to really spend with really learning the slokas well. You just maybe learn them at all, or you have to drag on 2 or 3 weeks after the end of the class to be able to read your slokas and do them, Or it takes you a month to write your essay, These are all things that happen because people don't make the understanding that they have to make a commitment to this class, a time commitment, for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever it is, you have to think that for these 6 weeks, I'm not going to volunteer for anything extra. I'm not going to travel, because when you travel, everything goes out the window. You can't remember what you were doing. Your time is different. The internet's different. You don't remember whether you brought your book with you or not, all these kind of things. If you're going to do the Bhakti Sastri class, don't plan to travel. Just stay in one place, So at any rate, that's my soapbox. Now I'm kind of over, Please forgive me, but I'm gonna make that a standard from now on with the Bhakti Sastri class.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. Okay, so let's discuss now. We're going today to do a review of chapters 4, 5, and 6. These 3 chapters, because we are going to take the test tomorrow over these chapters. Now, I'm going to kind of do a quick review over it to begin with here. And then after we do a quick review, then I will set you all up into groups, and you will kind of work with each other on trying to do memorization. And one thing I would like actually to say here is about memory. I put this slide in at the very last, memorization techniques. There are a number of different ways to remember things, and not everything works for everybody. But what I wanted to make a note of here is that these are ways that some people find a good method to remember things. Now, of course, the most common and well-known method for remembering things is rote, where you just say the same thing over and over again. By repetition, you get used to the way something sounds. Actually, I learned a lot of our morning program just by hearing it over and over again. I didn't spend an enormous amount of time just trying to remember how the words went to various parts of the morning program. I just heard it so many times that they just stuck in my memory without me actually making an effort to remember them. But at any rate, saying something over and over again, repetition, is one way to remember things. Another way to remember things is by using memory cards. Pushpanjali said she got some of these flashcards, and for memorizing slokas, that's usually a good way to go for some people. You write the sloka in English and in Sanskrit, and then you hold it with the back to your face so you can't read it, and then as you're going over it in your mind, then you flip it back over to see if you got the words right, and then you do it again and you do it again, and in this way you can have 12, or in our case, I think we have 12 slokas we have to memorize. Then you can go back over and over these various slokas, and in that way you can eventually memorize them. And that technique works for a lot of people. So another one is memorization digests, which is where you do some kind of an outline or some kind of a shortened form of your thing you're trying to memorize. This can be like at the bottom we have first letter associations, like we can have various words that stand for a whole group of things that are a list, like I was saying Sedfi, for Arjuna's reasons why he wouldn't fight. The C stands for compassion, E stands for enjoyment, D stands for destruction of dynasty, F stands for what is it? I is indifference, and F is for something. Destruction of dynasty, and I forget what the D stands for, but you have these different letters, and each one stands for the first letter of the word in that sequence, and then you use that. That's a way to remember. So sometimes you have a digest or a first letter association. You can use audio memory, sequential audio memory. That's how musicians learn songs and how we learn most of our songs. We have songs that we know that are famous songs that I used to sing when we were growing up. We never spent time remembering them. We just know them because we heard them so much and we sang them. So music can be used to help memory. So that's also composing songs. The gopis wrote songs about Krishna, so we can also write songs about some philosophy that we're trying to remember or some list we're trying to remember. Mind maps is a kind of a particular thing. It's something either you know about or you don't have any idea about, and I don't have time to talk about it now. Memory palaces is another similar kind of thing, where this is a very interesting technique, memory palaces, where you pretend that you're walking into a room like your room, and everything that you want to remember is connected with something you see in your room. Like, say you're trying to remember the 12 Mahajans. So you look in your room and you see your lamp and you associate that with one of the Mahajans. And then you see your table and you associate that with a different Mahajan. And for some people, that kind of system works. Hone in is a system where you're trying to actually understand the structure behind something. You have something like the Bhagavad Gita. We have 18 chapters, and we understand that it's broken up into 3 clumps of 6 chapters. So that's, we're developing a sense of how the structure of it is. Playfully absurd is oftentimes in helping yourself to remember something. The crazier it is, the easier it is to remember. So, there was this thing that our Nata Bhargaranga came up with for remembering the 12 Mahajans, something on the order of bread numbs bread numbs devotees, Krishna karma, something like that. And it was a crazy little ditty that he came up with. But each letter had the first letter of somebody that was one of the Mahajans. So the fact that it was kind of crazy makes it easy to remember. That's what advertising does. That's why in advertising, when people advertise a product, they try to make the product seem crazy, because the crazier it is, the more it sticks in your mind. And so similarly, you can use that in your in your aid that you can come up with something that sounds crazy, but it helps you to remember the thing that you're trying to remember. And of course, we talked about first letter association. So now we will get more into the fourth chapter, starting with that. But do any of you have any questions about memorization techniques?
Could there, Hare Krishna, this Pushpanjali, could there be a better time in the day is good for doing this type of memorization, or just whatever works?
Yeah, generally better. Earlier part of the day is better, but whenever there's time is, the way it works is usually whenever there's time is whenever there's time. But it should be some period of time where you're not being invaded by other people or phones ringing, and there's not some confusing thing going on in the background, So to study, you have to have as I used to say, clean, well-lighted space. That used to be the official, words that they used for it, clean, well-lighted space. So a place that is, peaceful, a place that's kind of where you're not going to be interrupted, a place where you're going to be able to, see what you need to see. You'll have whatever you need to have there. If you need water, there's something to drink. If you need, a comfortable chair, there's some way to sit where you're not being inconvenienced. So all those things help when you're trying to do study.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. But just bear in mind that everybody has the same problems when you try to study scripture. And these are mentioned, actually, in the Harinam Chintamani, that we find that when people are taking prasadam, I don't think I've ever seen somebody fall asleep eating prasadam. It's something that generally doesn't happen, because our senses are being materially enlivened at that point. So it's a type of service, and usually people don't fall asleep taking prasadam, nor do people fall asleep in a roaring kirtan where they're jumping around. However, when we have a bhajan where people are sitting down, there's a tendency to doze off. And when we're chanting japa, there's a tendency to doze off when we're trying to chant and we're sitting down. So this is not something that just happens to you. This is something that happens to everyone. And it will continue to happen until we actually develop a strong taste for the holy name. Now, surprisingly, in the Harinam Chintamani, there is a section where Haridas Thakur says that in hearing Krishna Katha, or in other words, hearing Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, it's even more likely that you will doze off, because we don't have a taste for the philosophy, the name, fame, pastimes of the Lord. That's what we're working on through devotional service. Eventually, we will purify our hearts enough that we will have a spontaneous taste for these things. But we don't have that now. And that's why when you sit down and you try to read, one of two things is going to happen. When you try to read, either A, you're going to snooze right out. You're going to look at the book, and then you'll realize that your head is in your lap, that you fell asleep. The other thing that can happen is that when you read, you'll suddenly feel the burning necessity to do something. You'll remember that you needed to write that email that you promised somebody you were going to write 2 days ago, and it just now popped into your head, and so now you're going to write it, Or you'll decide that the light has been flickering on and off for a while. You need to change that so you have a steady, good light, so you'll get up and do that. So this is the nature trying to read or study Krishna consciousness. And it's not just you. This is what happens to everybody when they try to take up Krishna consciousness and read the philosophy. It's part of the game. It's the way the material nature works. That when you're falling asleep while you're reading or you're hearing a lecture, that means you're being attacked by the mode of ignorance. The mode of ignorance wants you to sleep. When you decide you need to do something, you feel restless, that's because you're being attacked by the mode of passion. You have to do something. And so we have to recognize that both of these things are going to try to happen. If we're not so tired that we're falling asleep, then we're going to be awake enough that we're going to find the desire to be restless a problem. So whenever you sit down to try to memorize or hear Krishna consciousness, you're going to always hit these two obstacles. So your recourse then is you'll have to figure out how to get rid or pass these various obstacles, because otherwise they'll keep you from ever becoming knowledgeable about Krishna. You'll constantly, fall asleep. So, all right, enough said by that. Let's move over to the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. We talked about this before. I'm not going to go over the details anymore, but what I do want to go over is these, basic principles which will likely be on the test. So that's what I want to particularly focus on. Let me get things set up here for a second. So, we need to know what's the difference between action, inaction, and, as we said, impious action. So we have vikarma, karma, and akarma. So vikarma is impious action, karma is pious reaction, and vikarma is impious reaction. And, we need to know when the sun god spoke, when Krishna spoke to the sun god Vivishwan. As I've said, if you look on page 29 in your Bhakti Sastri handbook, you'll see Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, Bhagavad Gita chapter 5, Bhagavad Gita chapter 6, and from question number 43 to question 63. The questions that you're going to see tomorrow on the test will be in those questions. So 43 to 63, those 21 questions are possible questions. Not all of them will be on the test. In fact, only a small number of them will be. But if you can do well at answering all those 21 questions, you'll ace the test. There's no question about it, because there's not any other questions. The questions that are going to be asked are from this section here on page 29. So when we set you up in groups in a little while, these are the questions you're going to be looking at. So Gita was spoken to Lord Vivaswan how many years ago? So we find that in Bhagavad Gita 4:1, which is right here. Now, it doesn't say that in the verse, but it does explain it in the purport. So Prabhupada explains it in the purport. So if we go here, I instructed the imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivaswan, and Vivaswan instructed to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu instructed it to Ikshvaku. So if we read down into the purport,
120,400, 120,400,000 years.
Right. So here in this paragraph it says that the present moment we've just passed through 5,000 years of Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. Before this, there was Dwapara Yuga, 800,000 years. That's an approximation. And before there was Treta Yuga, 400,000 years. Thus, some 2,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son, Maharishi Ikshvaku, the king of the earth planet. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 have passed, accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord himself, the sun god Vivaswan. A rough estimate is that Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago. So there is your issue there that we have 120,400,000 years ago. So this is the kind of way you can study for the test. And when you begin to work on these things, then you'll see that this is the way that we can try to prepare for the test. And you can always stick close to your Bhakti Sastri handbook, because if you stick to your Bhakti Sastri handbook, you will see what the questions are, and you just have to look up the answers. And in most cases, many times the questions that you have in your book, the answers to them are in the slides. I've tried to make an effort to put most of the answers in the slides, but not all of them are there. Some of them I didn't get to because it's a big project and it takes me a lot of time to do that. So, why does Krishna appear? Well, there's a decline in religious practice, a rise in irreligion. He delivers the pious, he annihilates the miscreants, and reestablishes religion. So these are the reasons why Krishna appears. So that's one of the things we need to know. That's from chapter 4. This is described in verses 7 through 8. Now, this is something you're definitely going to have to know. So try to figure out a way to remember these 6 different kinds of avatars. So these lists, I know that may seem like, why are we bothering with these lists? But I kind of think of it like if you're trying to make a bridge across a swamp, you know, how do you get across a swamp? If you don't have a boat, it's very difficult to get across the swamp because it's watery, there's animals, there's all kinds of things you could get tangled up in. So it's not easy to make your way across a swamp. So if you're going to build a bridge across a swamp, you have to gradually put some posts into the swampy water till you hit solid ground, and then gradually you make a plank or two, and then eventually you build a whole bridge. So we're trying to make a bridge for our mind to be able to absorb this, structure of the Bhagavad Gita. So if we understand these lists, this helps us to get something that we can hang on to that will help us to keep our bearings. You know, if we're actually always connecting with a list, then we can, remember, well, I remember this list. What does this list tell me? It gives me a piece of Krishna consciousness, a piece of the structure of the universe, how things work together. In this case, this particular list is the avatars. What are they? They're, various kinds of avatars of Krishna, as we were saying here, the Purusha avatars. There's only 3 categories here, and those are Mahavishnu, Garbha Vishnu, and Kshira Vishnu. So causal Vishnu, and we have Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and we have the super soul in the heart, or Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, who lives on the milk ocean. The Guna avatars are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. There's only 3 of them. And now the others, there's unlimited amounts of. Leela avatars, those are avatars for Leelas. Manvantara avatars, they are special avatars for each Manvantara time period. Yuga avatars, They're avatars for bringing the Yuga Dharma. So in this age of Kali Yuga, the Yuga avatar is Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So Caitanya Mahaprabhu was the person who brought the Yuga Dharma. The Yuga Dharma for the age we're in now is, of course, the chanting of the holy names. That's what our Yuga Dharma is. So that's what a Yuga avatar is. So finally, we have this odd category, the bottom one, Shaktivesha avatars. And generally, Shaktivesha avatars are specially empowered avatars for a specific function. And they're usually not Vishnu Tattva. So Prabhupada is considered a Shaktivesha avatar. Jesus is considered a Shaktivesha avatar. Muhammad is considered a Shaktivesha avatar. Buddha is considered a Shaktivesha avatar. So these are avatars that are not full expansions of Krishna or Vishnu, but they are expansions, they're rather individual living entities like you and me, but they've been given special power to do something in this world. Vyasadeva is the literary incarnation. He's a Shaktivesha avatar. Prithu was one of the Shaktivesha avatars for being the right kind of ruler or kshatriya. All right. Any questions, or we'll just continue on this review? Okay. And here's another thing you're going to have to know. This is another list. If you just try to remember the list, at least you'll get, like 60 or 70 on the test, if you just focus in on getting the lists right. But if you want to do well on the test, you should remember all the other things too. So one of the lists will be the 6 kind of avatars. Another one of the lists will be the 9 stages of spiritual progress. We go from Shraddha to Sadhu Sangha, to Bhajana Kriya, to Anartha Nivriti, to Nishta, to Ruchi, to Asakti, to Bhava, and to Prema. So these are described briefly in this list here. There are 9 stages. So the beginning stage of spiritual life is Shraddha or faith, and the highest stage of spiritual life is Prema. That's where we have awakened our love for Krishna, and we are ready to go back home, back to Godhead. Now, they come from this verse, which is in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 1.4.15 to 16. Ado Shraddha Tato Sadhu Sangha Tabhajana Kriya To Narta Nivriti Syat Tato Nishta Ruchis Tataha Ata Shaktis Tata Bhavas Tata Prema Abhyudanshati Sadakanamayam Premna Pradurbhave Bhavet Krimaha. So this is the Sanskrit, and this is the individual stages taken out of that Sanskrit verse. So there's 9 of them. Try to remember all 9 of them. We're probably going to ask you what mode of nature the different varnas are in. So the Brahmanas are in goodness, the Kshatriyas are in passion, the Vaishyas are passion plus ignorance, and the Shudras are in ignorance.
Maharaj, we just need to memorize English, like Sanskrit, like Shraddha, Bhajana Kriya.
Well, you can memorize. You can remember either the English or the Sanskrit. Yeah.
Test on the answer one.
Yeah. So most people remember the Sanskrit because it's more technical, but you can, remember either one.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't have to remember both. And this is another list you're going to have to remember, the 12 Mahajans. So we have, the different people who are Mahajans. I'm going to see if I can remember that, if I can look up that thing that Natabargaranga sent. Bread numbs students Krishna karma. Swan people just bring bhaktas some yums. That was, here, I'll copy it out so I can put it on the. It's also on your WhatsApp, chat thing, but it's way, it's way back there, so hard to dig your way back to it, but I just pulled it out from there. Let me put it on to, where is chat? Okay, here's chat. Bread numbs students Krishna. Bread numbs students Krishna karma. Swan people just bring bhaktas some yums. So, if you look there, you'll see that bread is Brahma, nums is Narada, bread nums students, Shiva, students Krishna karma, Kumaras and Kapila, that's where the Krishna karma comes from. Then Swan people just bring bhaktas some yums, so Swan people is Swayambhuva. People, Prahlad, just Janaka, bring Bali. Bhaktas is Bhishma, some is Sukha, and Yams is Yama. So this was, I didn't come up with this one, but this was our Nata Bhargaranga. So he did this when we did this course about a year ago. So he came up with that. So if that helps you, you can use it. I'll post it again in the what do you call it? The WhatsApp chat line. Okay, so this is a way to try to remember these 12. You can use some other method. Maybe you have a better method or a different method altogether. It doesn't matter, just as long as somehow you figure out a way to remember what these 12 Mahajans are. So this is an important list. And, we will probably ask you why, what are the, what should you do to connect with the spiritual master? As we see here, the idea is you approach a spiritual master, you inquire submissively to. 3 is you render service. So you approach, inquire, render service. So that's a possible question. Now we're in chapter 5. You'll notice that chapter 4 did not have any Sanskrit words, or it didn't have many. I think it had one, Pashandi, which means atheist. There was one Sanskrit word in chapter 4. But in chapter 5, here we have all these different Sanskrit words. I rearranged these differently so they'd be easier to read and assimilate, So all of the Sanskrit snippets that are necessary in chapter 5 are all right here. Pradhan. What is it? Some total manifestation of the 3 modes of nature, and that's in Bhagavad Gita 5.10 in the purport. Palam chakva shantim apnoti naishtakim. Attained peace because of offering the results of all activities to Krishna. That's in chapter 5, text 12. Vibhu, the Supreme Lord, which is Bhagavad Gita chapter 5, text 15. Anu, which actually means atomic in size, but people usually take it to mean the living entity. So that's 5:15, but that's in the purport. It doesn't say that in the verse. Pandita Samadarshana, the wise see with equal vision. That's Bhagavad Gita 5:18. So you can study these various Sanskrit snippets to try to understand what they are. This is something that I highlighted the first time I was on this particular Bhagavad Gita section, but this won't be on the test. But what I really would like people to do is to memorize the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, at least these first 6 chapters. But again, it won't be on the test, so you don't need to worry with that right now. And here we have, again, action and inaction. What are they? And, we can find out.
Yeah, Maharaj, if you can discuss a little more, just a minute, action and inaction and action, one more time, please.
Yeah.
I get a little confused.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, let me see something here for a minute. Okay, so we were saying before that the important thing to recognize is that there is action, which means to do things for a particular material purpose. So you're doing what is not sinful. You're doing maybe some yajna, or you're doing regular work or whatever it is, but you're doing it for material purpose. That's called action or karma. And this means good karma. Now, there's forbidden action, which is called vikarma, or sometimes papa. And vikarma means that you are doing something that's especially forbidden in Scripture, and therefore you're getting a bad reaction as a result of doing that thing. So that's forbidden action, or vikarma. Now, the other thing is what we call inaction, which is akarma, and that's what devotion is. Devotion neither gives you good karma, nor does it cause, certainly it doesn't cause bad karma. So devotion is neither good karma nor bad karma. Devotion is akarma. And I'm not going to get into, you won't be asked to explain the action in and action in inaction. You will be only asked, if you get asked at all, for these 3 things: what is action, what is inaction, and what is forbidden action. That's the only thing I'm going to ask you about. The other thing's a little more confusing, so that won't be on this test, by the way.
Okay, then it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was thinking action.
Right. So we were talking a little about what is the pradhan. The pradhan is the undifferentiated material energy before it becomes the mahatat, where the universe begins to form out of the material energy. So the material energy is, as we said before, coming out of the Brahma Jyoti. So the Brahma Jyoti is Krishna's effulgence. It's spiritual, but it has a material aspect to it that comes out of it, and that's called the pradhan. Now the pradhan is inert, and it is not differentiated. But when the Supreme Lord glances at it, it becomes the mahatat. It begins to separate into the false ego and the 3 modes of nature. And once it's disturbed and begins to have distinctions, then it's called the mahatat. So the pradhan is that in-between phase where it's not the Brahma Jyoti, which is spiritual, and it's not the mahatat, which is actually the material universe. It's between the two. It is the material energy before the material energy begins to differentiate. So as we said before, in this words of Bhagavad Gita chapter 5, that what is the pradhan? It's the sum total manifestation of the three modes of material nature. So that's how Prabhupada explains it in chapter 5, text 10 on the in the purport.
Maharaj, I have one question, Maharaj, just
Okay.
for my own clarification. That can we, Maharaj, put like this also, that see all the elements, all these elements are called Mahatattva, but when they are not manifested, or maybe we can say when they are not active, it's called Pradhan. This is just for my understanding. Is that okay, Maharaj?
Yeah, this is basically the same thing. There's in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in about 3 places, it describes this progression of how the material energy becomes progressively developed. So we have the Brahma Jyoti, as we're seeing here, and the Supreme Lord creates the pradhan from the Brahma Jyoti. That's the Mahavishnu, I think, does that. He creates the pradhan from the Brahma Jyoti. But the pradhan is in perfect equilibrium. There is no distinction anywhere. It's not exactly the Brahma Jyoti because it's not spiritual anymore. It's in the material world. And it's not material energy yet because there's no distinctions yet. It hasn't become anything. It hasn't done anything yet. So it's unmanifested. And then once the Supreme Lord agitates the pradhan, then at that point the pradhan begins to fall out of equilibrium, and the first thing that forms out of the pradhan is the 3 modes of nature and the false ego. Then the false ego and the mode of goodness unite and create one kind of group of things. Then the false ego and passion unite and they cause a different group of things. Then the mode of ignorance unite with the false ego and create yet a different group of things. So, we have these 24 elements of Sankhya philosophy, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and then we have the 5 working senses, 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, and the 5 tanmatras, or the objects of the senses, and that is 23 elements of the Sankhya philosophy. So all these kind of congeal or precipitate out from the Mahatattva as the Mahatattva gradually goes from undifferentiated pradhan to the 5 working senses, 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, the 5 objects of the senses, and then mind, intelligence, and false ego, and finally time. All these things get separated out from the pradhan. But at that time, the pradhan is no longer the pradhan because it's not in equilibrium anymore. It's been settled out. Kind of like when you make a chemical reaction, and you put some chemicals together, and at first it looks like there's a solution and everything is in equilibrium, but soon some things begin to particleize and fall out of it. So that's kind of what's happening, that the pradhan is coming out of perfect equilibrium with no forms, no distinctions. It's the same everywhere. And then it gradually comes into false ego and the 3 modes of nature. And then false ego and the 3 modes of nature, those 4 things reunite and combine and create the 24 elements of material nature. And then from that we get all the myriads of forms and things that we experience in the everyday world.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Okay, so now you will need to know the 9 gates of the body. This should be fairly easy, This is kind of one that you can sort of figure out. But you do have to sort of think about it, because if you don't make any effort to remember these, you won't remember that 2 eyes are considered one actually, I guess they're considered 2 gates. So 2 eyes is 2, 2 nostrils is 4, 2 ears is 6, 1 mouth is 7, 1 anus is 8, and the genitals are 9. So okay, so there are 6 categories and 9 gates to the body. So remember that there's 3 sets of 2 and 3 sets of 1. So 2 3s are 6. 6 plus 1 3 is 3, so 6 plus 3 is 9. So overall there are 9. So that's another list that you will have to remember. And then let me see if we'll talk about these doers here. Okay, we'll skip this for now. Pandita Samadarsha. Pandita Samadarsha means seeing with equal vision. You know, we talked about this yesterday. The peace formula means to understand the Supreme Lord is the ultimate beneficiary of sacrifices, the Lord of planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of the living entities. I'm not going to talk about that much more. Now, keep these words in mind. So there's not much in chapter 4. The only words you have to remember in chapter 4 are pasandi, which means atheist. In chapter 5, we just talked about those. Now, these are all the words that you have to know in Sanskrit, word snippets in chapter 6. Ekaki, alone, Sochadeshi, sacred land, Yukta, well-situated yoga, and Pratyahara. By proper conviction, intelligence, one should gradually cease sense activity. So these are the words you have to study in chapter 6, the Sanskrit. When is the mind the best friend? When it's conquered. When is the mind the worst enemy? When it's unconquered. So that's what we have in chapter 6. We learned that at the beginning. Ekaki means alone, and that's why yoga would not be popular. And Amarish. Now, we have to understand what are the destinations of the unsuccessful yogi. So, there's 2 situations. If after many so if the yogi falls down from the process of yoga, and he hasn't been doing yoga for very long, he will have many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, and he'll be born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. That's what happens if he falls from yoga after short practice of yoga. Or if the yogi, after a long practice of yoga, falls down, he gets born into a family of transcendentalists, and this means that he will have a head start on getting back into yoga. And of course, in this next verse, 643, we learn that he immediately revives the consciousness of his previous life and again tries to make further progress. So, in either case, there's a good chance that the yogi who fails in this life will become a yogi again in the next life. But if he's just started yoga, he will become, born in a well-to-do family. But he will enjoy in the heavenly planets first. But if he's been practicing yoga for a long time, instead he'll be born into a family of devotees, and so they'll give him a head start on becoming advanced in yoga early on. Okay, so this is the Ashtanga Yoga system. Another list that you'll have to remember. What are these 9 stages? I'm not 9, but what are they? 8 stages. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharma, Dhyana, and Dhyana and Samadhi. So these are the 9 stages of the Ashtanga. Asta means 8, Anga means limb. So there are 8 parts And they're listed right there. Those are the 8 parts. Okay, so that's it. That's what I wanted to say as far as doing a review on my part here. Do any of you have any questions about any of those things that we discussed just now?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I would like to know that we have analogy in our test.
No, not this time around.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
We did the analogies the first time. So you'll be, once again, I want to call your attention to the lists. These are the lists that you will need to remember. The 6 kind of avatars, you'll have to know that. The 9 stages of spiritual progress, you'll have to know that. The various varnas of the 3 modes of nature, who's in which mode, you'll have to know that. The 12 Mahajans, you'll have to know that. That was here, 12 Mahajans. You'll have to know these words, at least some of them. What do they mean in English? You'll have to know what pradhan is. You'll have to know what the 9 gates of the body are. You'll have to know the words of chapter 6. You'll have to know when the mind is the best friend or worst enemy. And you'll have to know what the different possibilities are for the unsuccessful yogi and the Ashtanga Yoga list. So those are the major things to study. The various lists and the Sanskrit words. For chapter 4, there's only 1 Sanskrit word you have to know, Prashandi. For chapter 5, there could be a group of them that you would have to study. They're right there. They're slide 73. So that's chapter 5. And then for chapter 6, you have to know these words, ekaki shocho jesha yukta and pratyahara. So, all right. Any other questions before I break everybody into study groups? Let's see who we've got here.
Maharaj?
Yeah.
This is not from our study, this thing, but just a small thing that why it came in my mind, because you were showing a slide where you have put Krishna with other demigods standing. What is that called?
The Das Avatar?
No.
Pashandi.
No, not Pashandi. That this form, if we see the people who worship this form is unintelligent. I'm forgetting the name. Come on. Huh?
What chapter was it in?
No, Maharaj, it's gonna come later in Bhagavad Gita, but I was reading in Bhagavatam's 2nd canto, 1st chapter, where Shukdev Goswami is saying yogis, they worship this one, where all the Maharaj, where all the demigods are standing with Krishna, and then and everybody is going in his mouth. What is that?
The universal form.
Universal form. Sorry, Maharaj. Yeah.
Right.
So I just wanted, Maharaj, a small thing that in Bhagavatam it's written only unintelligent people worship this or they like this. But I was thinking, Maharaj, of course I'm unintelligent, but I'm just thinking, Maharaj, when I see, I feel very nice, because that way I feel, see, the mountains are his hair, the moon is his eye. So basically everything belongs to Krishna. So I just wanted to know why that unintelligent, people can appreciate also.
Yeah. What it means is, if you see in Bhagavatam, there is a chapter called The First Step in God Realization.
Right.
So, and in Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 9, verse 15 of chapter 9, we have this gradual progress. We have at the very top, we have the, bhaktas, or the, the pure devotees, and then we have what are called the pious, the Sukratinas. And then we have three categories known as the one who worships Krishna as one without a second, diverse in many, and in the universal form. So those are the Ekatvena and the Pritakvena Bahuda and the Vishvatamuk. So the Ekatvena is the Mayavadi or the Brahmavadi, the one who worships God as the Brahman or the effulgence. And then we have the Ekatvena, the Pritakvena Bahuda, that's the demigod worshippers who worship all the various demigod forms as one and the same. And then we have the Vishvatamuk, which is the universal form you're talking about. That's different from the Brahman. Now, that's considered sort of the lowest form of God realization. It's not, there's nothing wrong with it per se, it is God, but it shows the most material conception of God you can get, You're not even thinking of him as a person, you're not thinking of him as an essence like the Mayavadis do. You're thinking of him only as the sum total of the material energy. And so in other places in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that this, Vishvarup is described in different ways, sometimes as the Brahmanas being his arms, the Kshatriyas being, the Brahmanas being his head, Brahmanas being his arms, the Vaishyas being his belly, and the Sudras being his legs. Sometimes we hear about it, different planetary systems, and so in this way we see that the forms of the material world are being equated to the Supreme Lord. So in the Brahman, there's no forms at all. Brahman is just white light. There's no form, there's no variety. You can't really talk much about it because there's nothing to talk about, However, the universal form is the entirety of how Krishna branches out into everything that we see around us. And so it's a very dazzling, very bewildering form. And it was the form that Arjuna wanted to see in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He asked Krishna to see it, not because he wanted to see it per se, but because Arjuna wanted to show that Krishna was not just his friend, that Krishna was actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that therefore only the Supreme Personality of Godhead could show the universal form. An ordinary person would not be able to do that. So the Vishvatamuk, or this universal form, is considered to be kind of what in modern philosophical terms we call pantheism, to see God in the entire universe. It is a kind of God conception, and certainly devotees could and should see the Supreme Lord in everything in nature, including the mountains and the sun and the trees and everything. But we know that we have a personal conception much beyond that, and that's what we actually serve and where the focus of our devotion is. Whereas for the pantheists, or the Vishvatamukas, that's where it stops. That's as far as they get. They only get there, and that's why it's said it's for the unintelligent.
Yes, Maharaj.
Thank you.
beside that, in I think Bhagavatam second canto also, they said about Atala, Patala, Sutala, and there are different
Tala, Rasatala,
Tala, Rasatala, and this is also described in all limbs of the body of Krishna also.
Right.
So this is also for
also the Vishvatamukha universal form, or sometimes Vishvarup. There's many names for it,
but this is not the materialist understanding.
What
is it? This is the materialist understanding, also like universal features of Krishna.
I'm not sure what question you're asking. You know, I can understand what words you're saying, but I don't understand what the question is.
I'm saying, like you said, because a lot of materialists, they don't want to understand Krishna is the God, so that's why Arjuna asked to show universal form to Krishna.
Right.
It's not for actually for Arjuna, because Arjuna is more elevated than that.
Right.
So what about those like Atala, Utala, Rashatala, those features? Is it for same reason?
Well, those features were also visible during the form that Krishna showed to Arjuna. You know, in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in the universal form, all kinds of things are visible there. You know, he says that all the past, the present, and the future are visible there. Various demigods and demons are visible there. The planetary systems are visible there. In other words, you know, Krishna says at one point, whatever you want to see, either past, present, or future, is visible right now. You're seeing like the sum total of everything that could possibly be seen or known right there, you know. And that's why Arjuna needed divine eyes to be able to take it in. Otherwise, a human being could not relate to it, you know. And although Arjuna was having trouble, there were other living entities who were seeing it too, and they were also terrified by it. And that's why at the end of 11th chapter, Krishna says, you know, this form of yours is very terrible. Please take it away. And I want to see you again in your four-arm form. Of course, Arjuna really wants to see Krishna in his two-arm form, but he says four-arm form. And then Krishna comes to the four-arm form. Then Krishna comes to the two-arm form. So all this is within one Krishna. Krishna is all these things simultaneously. So the materialists, they can't relate to Krishna's personal form, but they can relate to the material energy. So this is why it's called the first step in God realization. For people who are very materialistic, they can understand God only in this, you know, materialistic Vishvatamukha form or Vishvarup form.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah.
This form, only the Arjuna, he was not the only one witness. But the Gandharva, the like Morut, Asura, they are witness to become.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So
Sunday also, right, Maharaj?
Yeah. A lot of witnesses were there for that, because Arjuna's was participating in the Battle of Kurukshetra, and that was a very famous and important event. So all the sages and demigods were all there. So everybody was had a seat there at the Colosseum. So all right. So I'm going to divide you all into groups, and you can study together. What I suggest that you do is you write a list of these various lists, you know, the 12 Mahajans, the 8 levels of yoga, the 9 stages of devotional progress, all these different things. You write those lists down, the 12 Mahajans, and you quiz each other, or you try to come up with some kind of memory devices that will help you to remember them tomorrow when you get asked them on the test. And then you go over the various Sanskrit terms. And I've said that, if you look at the slides, you'll see the Sanskrit terms. There won't be any for chapter 4, but there will be for chapter 5 and chapter 6. Now, you don't have to worry about chapter 1, 2, or 3. We already did that. That's gone. That was the first test that we had. So just worry about 4, 5, and 6. And there's no words really for 4, 5, and 6. And then there's a few of these other things that you need to kind of focus on that we went over today. So that's what you need to focus on. What I would like to do is put the men together and the ladies together. So again, if Jairade can separate her phone from Bhaktivatsala's computer, and we can put Gokuleshwari, Pushpanjali, and Jairade together, and we'll put Arjuna, Yarun, Bhagavan Narahari, and Bhaktivatsal together. So let me set that up. It is 11:20 now. We can go till, I would say, 1 o'clock.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Bhaktivatsal. Did you get popped out or what happened?
Yeah, Maharaj, it's over. We did just, we had already done last week also, but we finished. So, Maharaj, while they are doing, they are still doing, can I ask one more question, Maharaj? Since there's no one. So, Maharaj, again, it's from Bhagavatam, first canto, that when Parikshit Maharaj is cursed, or is about to be cursed, Prabhupada is writing, Srila Prabhupada is writing that he became angry and envious. That means Parikshit Maharaj became envious and angry of Shamik Rishi. So I was thinking, Maharaj, that angry understandable because, he was thirsty and he didn't get a warm welcome. So that's why he was angry. But why was he envious? Because Shamik Rishi didn't have a kingdom like him. So why, and especially he's a devotee, why would he be envious?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is getting into the sort of area where we're talking about something that is actually a pastime. That generally speaking, we know that Maharaj Parikshit didn't have those kind of sentiments, and he was a very elevated devotee. So maybe he had some tinge of it. Actually, practically everybody has envy to some extent or another. Envy doesn't necessarily mean that you envy people who have more than you, or at least in the sense of physically more. Obviously, a king has more than anyone else could possibly have as far as material facilities go. But, in one sense, the Brahmanas are on a higher level than the Kshatriyas, so maybe that had something to do with it. But it's hard to know those kind of things because I don't think they're spelled out anywhere. Maybe in one of the writings of our previous acharyas there's some explanation of it, but I would say that Krishna just facilitated the emotions that would make him do something that would cause the Bhagavatam to be recited. And he was pure enough that, Krishna felt it was time for him to come back home. So, the fact that he was running a kingdom, that was Krishna's way of solving the issue of getting him out from under his kingdom and solving the issue of needing some pretext to write the Srimad Bhagavatam or to have the Srimad Bhagavatam be spoken on. And, it was kind of a lesson also in interpersonal conduct that, we shouldn't get hot under the collar over some perceived, infraction where somebody seems to neglect us or whatever. So other than that, it's one of those things that you really can't explain much about.
All right, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
So you all are going, I guess then tomorrow at 6:30 we'll see everybody back, and we'll have the actual test. And you can get in contact with
Dharamraj,
right? About
sure, Maharaj. Sure.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, Maharaj, I'll just finish all the shlokas of the first unit, and then I'll just call in and say here all.
Right.
So
Okay.
I was just waiting, Maharaj. Yeah.
I'll see how everybody's doing in the other chats,
Yeah.
and then we'll see whether we're going to shut this down. I'll see what's happening with the girls, and then I'll come back and see what's going on with Yarun
Right.
and Arjuna.
Recording in
Pranayam.
progress.
Uh-huh. Oh,
I'm just seeing how you all are doing here.
Plus, Mataji, we don't have time for that, It took a lot of time, go step by step. But Bhakti Yoga is very easy and, good way you can do it.
Yeah.
Anytime, any places.
Right. But, yeah, it's like you're not getting the full, you're not getting the full gold, just enough to keep you caught up in this material realm still.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maharaj, we're just discussing question number 62, the yogis who are attracted to what cannot attain the stage of perfection. So we were just discussing some of the byproducts of what can hold one to that stage of perfection.
Oh, that's good. So that's in, what is it? 623. That's where that is.
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Okay. So have you all made a good effort to try to pare down those, figure out good mnemonic devices for the lists of things? We've got a lot of lists to try to get through, and some good devices to remember the Sanskrit. If you try to remember Sanskrit words little by little, you'll remember more and more of them, and they'll be easier to figure out. Even when you've never heard a sloka before, you can kind of get a sense of what it's talking about. But anyway, so I don't know, maybe we could go for another 15-20 minutes here. Is that what you all are fine with that, or what?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we pretty much covered it, and I guess we can just do another run through it.
Yeah. Really try to focus on the lists, because that's the major thing, and then focus on the Sanskrit bits, and you'll do okay on the test tomorrow. All right. And if maybe Gokuleshwari, you could help Pushpanjali memorize her slokas.
The slokas. Yeah.
Because evidently our Glickeria is ready to hear the slokas, but I don't know if she has time to help Pushpanjali work her way through memorizing them. But.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I also would have trouble memorizing myself.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna. But Maharaj, is there but see, like, I was trying to search online because I honestly am not great with like Sanskrit myself, so I wanted to like hear it repetitively, like one verse repetitively, so that I could kind of like penetrate how it should sound like instead of my own concoction of how it should sound like. And I know, but there's no place where it actually has all the shlokas for Bhakti Sastri anywhere, is there?
I don't think so, but Yarun seemed to have some kind of a line on that. I'll have to ask him, if he has. They were saying that if you just type in Bhagavad Gita 2:16, you'll go right to somebody reciting it. I don't know. I've never tried it. I don't know how that works. So I'll see if there's something like that. I know there must be.
Thank you, Mark.
I know there must be someone who has done sloka recitation, of straight through first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, straight through second chapter. I know that must be out there somewhere, but I'll see if I can.
They do have that. They do have that, but it's kind of like you have to wait for that verse to come around, and you have to keep playing that section.
Right.
So if it's something that you can kind of just keep playing. But I mean, I can look into it more too, and I can just also practice with Bhaktivasala as well.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll see if I get a chance, and I'll put up a version of those particular slokas, and you can work from that. I'll see if I can load that up into my Chandra Swami educational channel on YouTube. I'll see if I can get around to that. I've got a lot going on right now, but I'll see if I can do that. It doesn't sound like too big a project, but I'll try it.
Oh, thank you, Maharaj. That would be so nice. Definitely will develop the Bhakti Sastri Bhagavad Gita sector.
Right. We'll definitely have the whole teaching assignment for that.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I would like to know, I told Caritamrta ji within 21st I will give her all verses. Is okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I was asking if you could help Pushpanjali also with helping her to memorize the slokas, and maybe Jai Radhe as well. You have a little bit of a head start on it because, you've got the Bengali pronunciation, which is not that different from Sanskrit, so there's some, although Bengali is not Sanskrit, it's a different language, but it's close. At least you can help them with how to memorize.
Maharaj, Pushpanjali Mataji, she can call me and we can make an arrangement.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to see what's going on the men's side, and then we'll go on for another 15 minutes or something like that. Hare Krishna, anybody still here? Or I'm trying to figure out what's going on on this side.
We're still here.
What are you all working on right now? You're
coming to Daitabe.
What's that?
No, it's I had a call. I just tell them I'm leaving. One person just called me. That's it. Okay, Maharaj, we went through the questions with all four of us. And we have some practice how to memorize from Bhaktavatsal Prabhu and also Jaran Prabhu, and I tried to make some note. I had already read all of those, but as they have more better idea, maybe some idea, I have some which they also like communication, and I note down and try to memorize. Some of this we practice upfront, how to recite it without looking the answers. So the way, that's the way we done until chapter 6, all the questions until 63, I guess.
Okay. So, is your Arun still on? I see his name here. I just wonder is he still in communication? Was it you that was saying that there was some place on the internet where people could hear the various slokas or something like that? Or somebody was saying.
I found in YouTube also. Gita Mataji, what's Gogoleshwari Mataji? She also told, and I found some on YouTube. If just YouTube search like 2.7, I think in the beginning those are the YouTube coming first. So there are nice research. One Prabhuji I saw on the YouTube, he is teaching one little boy, 5 years boy, and whole things he memorized segment by segment in the beginning, and then one line by one line, and then 2 lines by 2 lines, and then finally 4 lines by 4 lines. So
no, that's a good strategy. That works. The strange thing is that many of the slokas I know, I never set out to memorize them. I just memorize them accidentally by hearing them enough times. They somehow stuck in my mind. And then there are some slokas that I've tried to memorize many, many times and never stick in my mind. I don't know. There's something weird about that, And but sometimes I do it like that. I memorize the first line, and then the second line, and then the third line, and finally I memorize the fourth line. Then I try to remember the first and second line, and the third and fourth, and then finally all four lines together. You know, that's a good way to strategize your way through it.
Yeah, I found that Prabhuji was doing really nice work.
Okay, so maybe then we'll call it that for today, and we'll see everybody back at 6:30 tomorrow for the actual test. So that'll be where we'll come together. I was telling the ladies, if I get a chance, maybe I will do some reading of the slokas. Yeah. You know, I'm not the best guy in the world for that, but I'll try to do it, and then I'll upload it to the...
it's called Bhagavad Gita by Balgopal. If the YouTube search, Balgopal. So they're very nice. One Prabhuji was said by Balgopal.
Okay.
It's ISKCON process also.
Okay.
He's on the ISKCON Devotee.
Okay, so if you all want, you can break off now. I think the ladies are going to break off in a few minutes too. So we'll end the session for today, and we'll see everybody back at 6:30 tomorrow evening.
Okay. Okay, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so we've got everybody back together here. Everybody's able to hear?
Yes, we're back, Maharaj.
Okay, so thank you all for today's session. We will be back tomorrow at 6:30 for the test, so please sign on at 6:30. I have something I've scheduled right after the test, so if you can make it at 6:30, I would really appreciate it. That way, by 7:30, everybody will have their questions all submitted and answered, and I can begin to look at them. And I'll see if I can get to putting up a version of the slokas, reciting them on my Chandra Swami educational channel, and I'll give you all a link to it if and when I do that. So we will see you all then tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. So Vancha Kapadivascha Kripasidhubhyevacha Hare Krishna.